Morning, everyone. It's Joe Waxman, and I'm back with another mini reading. This morning, I would like to look at the chart of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the famous civil rights leader of the 60s. He was a very inspiring man and most well known for his speeches. I'm not going to try to imitate him. He had a very powerful voice, which we'll get to. Martin Luther King Jr., I should write Jr. because he was a senior, his father. Born 15th of January, 1929, 12 p.m. in Atlanta, Georgia. All right, so he was a Capricorn Sun, right conjunct the MC in the ninth sign. So MC in the ninth sign tends to lead one towards a career that is involved with higher education, philosophy, religion, ninth house type things. And this is true for Martin Luther King. He was a pastor for in a Baptist church. And he was brought up religious. And Capricorn is a no-nonsense kind of sign, very serious, ambitious, hardworking, authoritarian leadership, kind of, fatherly kind of sign. And with Sun in Capricorn towards the MC, I mean, it really shows he took religion very seriously. He took his studies very seriously. And he did get a doctorate. So he was very well educated, very religious, very philosophical, very high-minded in that sense. And that's where he shone as a sort of religious, philosophical, inspirational leader. Capricorn's a leader in their achievement world, in the material world, and Sun is a natural leader. It's the king. Sun is our soul, the star of our being. So this is a very prominent position, and he would have gained recognition no matter what he did, because it's hard to ignore a Sun conjunct the MC, even if it's in the ninth sign. That just, like I said, that just denotes more of a tendency to go towards, education, religion, philosophy as a career, which he did. And then later into civil rights. The Sun is ruling the fourth sign. Again, IC is in the third sign, but so bulk of the fourth house is what we call intercepted, but I don't think that's I haven't noticed such a problem with that or a big deal. But anyway, fourth sign. So what's happening here is that the roots, his upbringing, his people of the homeland, which in his case would be not just his family, but his Black community, because he was very big-minded, right? Which we'll get to. We see that in other places. A lot of these planets show that. But because he was big-minded, the people of his homeland, Black people, the Black community, he was lifting them up to the heights, to the visibility, right? He represented people of the homeland with his Sun, because Leo's here in the homeland, and it's up here in the heights of the career visibility, MC. So he's lifting them up. He stands for them. He represents them, and he represented them as a pastor, and then later in civil rights. Right? Moon in Pisces, very compassionate. Pisces really has the most capacity to be not only creative and imaginative, but deeply compassionate and caring for, just people in general. I mean, Cancer is also a very compassionate sign, but more for their own sort of, their protection, their family's protection. Pisces is just very generally caring, loving, big, just everything's big with Pisces. Big heart, big mind, big soul, big spirit. very creative. And then here we have Venus conjunct the moon. Venus is exalted in Pisces. So this exaltation is really lifting up the moon to this very, very kind of exalted love. Exalted Venus in Pisces is very, again, compassionate, deals with things like a sort of unconditional love. Even though Venus is romance and more materialistic, the Piscean aspect brings in a kind of unconditional love, if you will. Now, this is a very soft-hearted aspect, Venus conjunct Moon, because they're both feminine planets. They're both soft planets. Very much complements the Capricorn Sun, which can be kind of cold and hard and materialistic. This gives him a very spiritual, loving, soft, romantic kind of quality where he also needs relationships to feel emotionally satisfied with Moon conjunct Venus. And it just makes him very, although like tough on the surface, underneath, he's very soft-hearted, very relationship-oriented, very compassionate, very caring. And in the 11th house, I mean, that's extremely telling, because 11th house is the house of hopes and wishes and dreams, right? And we all know about his famous speech, "I have a dream." That's no coincidence. I mean, that's very much related to the 11th house kind of thing, because 11th house, after all, is thinking about groups and networks and society as a whole, humanity, the biggest group of all. Here he's thinking about humanity, but in relative to his hometown, his homeland people, the black community, the black race. That's the community that he's representing. Even though he is still thinking about, he's not saying, he never said he wanted black people to be superior to white people or anyone else. He's saying he wants equality for all people, regardless of, race or color of skin or ethnicity or any of that stuff. So here he's thinking about, he's representing the black community, but he's really thinking about humanity as a whole. And he's very compassionate, and he was compassionate for all people. He stood for nonviolence. He was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. He was a very peaceful warrior, peaceful leader. And we see that here: hopes, wishes, dreams, success of career, which he had, and Moon, bringing in the 3rd and 4th house cusp in the quadrant. So again, more of the homeland, because still the IC is in the 3rd sign, but it still represents 4th house. And 3rd house would be communication, speaking, writing, expressing, skills of the hands, neighbors. He was for the neighborhood, elevating the neighborhood, the people of the neighborhood, siblings. And then Pluto is here in the 3rd house, so he's bringing that in Cancer. Pluto in Cancer, by the way, is very much for striving for equality, because Cancer represents the mother. So here was this was way before my time, so I'm just kind of speculating from everything I heard. It's not like I lived through it, but liberating women and mothers, and just in general, that civil rights, the early civil rights movement, the minority, the underdog from oppression, from their contrived sort of constricted roles, as imposed by society. Women have to stay home and be mothers and can't go, can't have careers, can't do anything else. A lot of that was forced, but that's a different story. It doesn't matter. It was appropriate for the time, the breaking free of women and of minority groups into, freedom and equality, that sort of thing. Pluto in Cancer very much strives for that. And even more so when we got to Pluto in Virgo, there was an even further liberation from that. So he's bringing in all that. He's bringing in the power, and we get this trine, really nice trine from Pluto to the Moon. So that was really empowering his leadership his heart, his ability to reach people, to inspire and influence people, because the moon is not it's not like the sun. It's the heart, and people really feel the heart. When you're coming from the heart, they know you're genuine. So when he has this Pluto trine the heart and Venus in the 11th house, they could really feel him as a leader. And then they saw him here in a very high position. The sun is more visible. It's more about being seen. The moon is more about being felt. People feel the moon. People see the sun, right? People feel the sun too, but you see the sun because it's light. And the moon can be seen. I mean, the moon has some visibility, but it's more felt. It's more about feeling. So they feel his genuineness as a community leader, as a group leader here. And Pluto makes him even more powerful, more dynamic, right? Strong. And because we want that with this is a very, very solid aspect. Moon conjunct Venus in compassionate Pisces. Very compassionate, very soft-hearted, really nice and feminine, but Pluto gives it that dynamic depth and strength that he needs. Plus, in the third house, bringing in those communication skills into the group network. That's really strong, right? Now, the moon has some conflicts here. Might as well talk about that now. Mars opposite Saturn, both square the moon in a T-square. Now, Mars is dangerous, especially in hard aspect with Saturn or Pluto, but here we have it in hard aspect with Saturn. Mars becomes dangerous because Mars is the aggression. Mars is the muscles, the masculine fighting energy. It's the warrior. It's the warrior inside us. It rules weapons, knives, violence, guns. It's also our willpower. And when it's in hard aspect to Saturn, like it is here, that can create accidents and violence. You see that again and again. I know because I have it in my chart in the 10th house. Well, Saturn's kind of in between 9th and 10th, but Mars is very much in the 10th house. And I am very accident prone. When I was a kid, I cut my knee down to the bone. I broke both arms in 3 places in one fall, if you can believe that. 3 breaks in once. And I've gotten in lots of fights as a kid. I don't anymore because I'm more conscious, aware of it, but it can attract and breed violence either from or to. Now, he was conscious enough to not be a violent person himself, but because this is in opposition, he's attracting violence to himself. And not just once. I mean, he was attacked more than once. Finally, in the end, he was shot, but he was attacked with a knife at least once. And there may have been more attacks. I don't know the details, the fine details of his life. I know he was attacked at least once with a knife. So that's, Mars and Saturn can create accidents, violence, and attacks, right? And here Saturn's in the 8th house. So it's bringing in an element of secrecy, of hiddenness, and we know that the CIA was on his trail. The CIA wanted him dead. I mean, let's just be real about it. That's what I believe. The CIA killed him because he was too powerful, right? And we see that. This is secrecy. Saturn is being secret because what Saturn does to Mars is it suppresses it. Mars does not want to be suppressed. Mars is an aggressive masculine planet. It's like suppressing a soldier. That's a dangerous thing, and it causes accidents because now Mars is not free to act without being pressured and without being controlled and contrived and limited, and it's building up pressure and tension, and it's not acting in smart ways. So it's very violent and accident prone. Saturn messes Mars up and causes accidents and violence, right? And here we have them both aspecting the sensitive moon conjunct Venus in Pisces, right? So this is violence toward his moon, which is a very vital part. It's our mind and heart, our inner mind, our inner being, right? It's very sensitive here. Also shows upbringing that was not easy, and then just reading some of his biography, that he had a very difficult upbringing, very harsh. There was a lot of violence, but all in all, there was still, positivity. It wasn't like all bad, but it was difficult. It was rough. And that's Mars square the moon. Mars square the moon is a potentially abusive aspect. Saturn square the moon is a potential emotional starvation, especially in early childhood. But it's a real, lack of love, lack of emotional nourishment, satisfaction, always striving to, find that love, that emotional fulfillment, because the moon is where we need to feel emotionally satisfied, and the sign in the house is, and the conjunctions and aspects are how we get it. Inevitably, it creates a lot of maturity, emotional maturity, and kind of responsibility and ability to withstand difficulty, but not without its own pains and hardship. And here, this is very sensitive, like deeply, deeply sensitive, with Moon, Pisces, conjunct Venus. So much sensitivity, so much pain, but he withstood it. He withstood a lot of pain and grew strong from it, and withstood a lot of abuse and violence even. And here we can have some suppressed anger issues, some I don't know. I think there could have been some violent outbreaks on his side as well. He might have been violent, but ultimately for a good cause, a just cause, a compassionate cause, or what he thought was. As a child, later we know he was nonviolent, but this is a very difficult aspect. Ascendant in Taurus, so naturally very stubborn, very Taurian, Taurus is earthy, grounded. I just did a video about Taurus, so it's not like I don't know what it means, but it's like very materialistic. Not that he was materialistic, but Taurus generally is. It's very concerned with security, food, money, wealth, luxury, sensuality, sensual stuff. But it's very vocal, Taurus, because it rules the voice. And he was a powerful speaker. Mars in the second house being Taurus's natural sign in the natural zodiac, here with Gemini. So Taurus ascendant, great for voice, great for speaking, great for singing, speaking, anything to do with the voice. And Mars here makes his voice so powerful, right? Mars is power, that masculine power. Very powerful, very dynamic voice. With Gemini, he can speak, communicate excellent, dynamic, powerful, right? Venus is the ruler of Taurus. Venus is going into the 11th house. So his natural tendency is towards groups and networks, being a central figure in groups, right? Being a group leader, group relationships. Venus is very relationship oriented. So naturally, he's going to want to belong to groups. His group was the religious group, the Baptist church, and the Black community. That's where, and to some extent, I guess you could say his academic, when he was in academic, that could also be, although that's 9th house, still the academic community, I guess you could say, was here. Mars is bringing, let's see, 12th house and 7th house influence into the second house. So seeking relationships, security in relationships, bringing wealth from, he married, and we know that, and that probably brought him some wealth and some security that was important to him, especially being ruled by Venus and Venus conjunct the moon. And his wife played a prominent role, and actually took on his, after he died, she took on a lot of what he started with the civil rights movement. Coretta Scott King, I'm not sure her name. Anyway, but yeah, we see that here. Mercury, so second house ruler Mercury, and 5th house is going into the 10th house here. So speaking, again, communicating, speaking into the most visible place, so very visible, speaking to large groups. That's very prominent with this. This powerful speech going into the daylight, the massive, the crowd, the visible, the career. And in Aquarius, Aquarius is very concerned with society as a whole, equality. That's, you know, Aquarius is either going to be on the low end, just very rebellious and just like, you know, rebellion for its own sake. I mean, if you think about Axl Rose with the Aquarius stellium, that's one way it can go. Just this bad rebel, you know, he was a rock star. Another way it can go is, you know, a scientist or somebody who's, you know, thinking about all society and you know, working towards civil rights and a utopian, or if they're a more evil-minded dystopian society. Of course, we know that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was wanting a much more evolved society. And so here he's speaking for the evolution of society, for equality, for all people, even though he represented the Black community. You know, he wasn't solely, I do not believe he was solely for the Black person. He was for all of humanity. That's Aquarius. Aquarius does not want to distinguish. But of course, he had to represent his own people and bring them to equality because there was a lot of, you know, ugly racism at that time. So, and here we have a square, not a tight square, but still a square between Jupiter and Chiron in the 12th. And this is a very prominent position. Jupiter is ruling the 11th house cusp and the 8th house cusp. 11th house cusp, so like the group, the community, the group, the network, the Black movement, the civil rights movement, here is going into the 12th house and the 8th house and the 12th. 8th house and the 12th house is in Vedic astrology called Vipreet Raj Yoga, especially if the ascendant is well aspected, which it is. So here that means that difficult things are producing good results because 8th and 12th are both difficult houses. So when 8th goes into 6th, 8th, or 12th, or 6th, 8th, when 6th, 8th, and 12th lords are going into one or another houses, then it produces something good, especially if the ascendant lord is good. So here we have something good coming out. Plus, Jupiter in the 12th in general shows somebody who's just very, very divinely inspired, has good luck from the subconscious, from the spirit world, and can be a very spiritually motivated type person. And here with Chiron, Jupiter conjunct Chiron, he was very empathetic, very empathic, very feeling for the lower section of society, the underdog, because Chiron is the wounded healer. And Chiron starts out his life being rejected by his mother, and then later becomes a healer, a shaman, a wise man, a teacher, an astrologer, but then is wounded again by Hercules, who shoots a poisonous arrow at his leg, and the poison actually was one that he made, so it's very ironic. But the end result is that Chiron is a very wise but very empathic type of character because of his ability to connect with the most underprivileged segments of society, the wounded, the rejected, right? And here we have Jupiter conjunct Chiron. So here he's a teacher and benefactor of the lowest segment of society. And being in 12th house, this is his subconscious motivation. This is a very, very deeply inspired, empathic signature, astrological signature. And not only that, we can see here, we look at the extended charts, the declination and speed of planets. So one thing is that Mars is out of bounds. So violence in his life and the passion, violence, all Martian things are going to be exaggerated, right? Both to and from him. There was a lot of violence in his life, but also a lot of passion. and power and strength and warrior. You know, he was a peaceful warrior and powerful speaker because Mars is in the second house in Gemini. So this is giving tremendous ability to really bring that Martian power to his speech and to his everything he did, right? Spiritual warrior. The other thing we can see is Chiron is stationary direct at 1 second. That's incredibly slow. That's very slow. And so anything that's stationary or close to stationary is going to be incredibly powerful. So here we have this incredible empathy for others, this incredible identification with the underdog, the underprivileged, the outcast, the minority, all the people, not just Black people, anyone who's going to be rejected by society, who's rejected, you know, who's suffering, who's come on hard times, the poor, the neglected, all minorities, all underdog groups. And here he's a teacher. Jupiter brings wisdom. Jupiter brings, it's the most beneficial of planets, Jupiter. It wants to give and expand, and it's good-hearted, good-natured, right? And here we have it trine to Neptune, which is idealism and, you know, divine love, even spirituality, fantasy, illusion, of course, but for an evolved person, this high spirituality, right? There's a wide trine to Saturn, nonetheless. It's still there, giving him this, well, it's out of sign, but Earth, and here's some fire. But anyway, this is really his spiritual motivation to help humanity, to help the underprivileged. It's very strong because Chiron in here is stationary directs. Chiron is super potent. So here he's a teacher and a shaman from a spiritual perspective, because it's in the 12th house and Taurus, so it's very grounded in the practical. So he's, yeah, I mean, no less. I mean, Taurus does not detract from his ability to be a spiritual figure. And he even had, he even worked with spiritual leader and teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, right? He was very spiritual, very coming from this highly evolved place. And here we see that. This was a spiritual man. This is a highly evolved man, right? So I think that covers most of it. We see how strong he was in leadership and speaking ability. We see his spiritual motivation, you know, his heart, his compassion, his empathy, his good-naturedness. We have an unaspected Uranus in Aries in the 11th house, but pretty much approaching the 12th house, conjuncting the 12th house cusp. Uranus unaspected will be even more potent as far as its motivation, as far as its you know, it's not going to interact with any other planets. But what it's going to do, especially in Aries, is it's incredible inspiration. And anything that's in the influencing the 12th house, here this is 11th house and 12th house, showing like very unique, in the 11th house, very unique dynamic groups, networks, inspiring towards groups and networks, communities, very inspirational for their civil rights movement, because both Aries and Uranus are inspiring. Aries is the most inspiring sign. Uranus is like a bolt of lightning, so it can be explosively inspiring. You know, that's the highest end of Aries, is this devotional inspiration. You know, nothing is more inspired than an Aries who's devoted to a cause, because they have that single-mindedness. And because it's influencing the 12th house, then we're getting this this subconscious inspiration, this devotional inspiration for his whole life. Like, he was a deeply inspired man to fight for his cause, right, which was civil rights. And that's why he was so affected effective, and that's why ultimately he was murdered, because he was too inspiring, and he was too powerful. Really, I mean, this is a wonderful aspect here. So, and Vesta, just a small, it's an asteroid, not just, but it's an asteroid, and it shows devotion. And here in Aries, it's, they look at this, they have a very similar shape and feel to them. Vesta is the sign of devotion. It's the Vestal fire. The Vestal virgins lit the fire every day in ceremony in Rome. And they were virgins, and they were religious, and they were devoted. And Aries is a sign of devotion. It can be devoted to the ego on the low end. So Aries can be the most selfish, the most egotistical, or it can be devoted to God or devoted to a cause, right? Aries can be very devotional and inspiring. They have the spark of fire. They can light the fires. So yeah, here we see his true spirit, his true nature. What a great soul. And again, just to go finalize his death thing, Saturn opposite Mars is a violence in opposition. Saturn in the 8th house deals with authorities and secret services. It could be interpreted in different ways, but here, because Saturn, it represents authority, and especially because it's 9th and 10th house, it's very authoritarian, and in the 8th house represents secrecy. So he had secret enemies for sure, because not just Saturn in the 8th house, Saturn opposite Mars. Oppositions reveal that, especially Saturn Mars opposition reveals violent opposition, and the 8th house brings in secrecy, Saturn's authority, and then again Jupiter rules Sag in the 12th house, so more secrecy. Ultimately, it ended his life, right? So CIA, right? Secret groups and enemies, secret service, things like that. So that's basically Martin Luther King Jr. in a nutshell. Wonderful humanitarian leader, civil rights leader, incredibly powerful speaker, and great man, spiritual leader, really a spiritual leader. Okay. That's it for today. If you like this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And if you want to book a reading, go to my website, macroastrology.com. I offer mini readings and full readings. So, this was a mini reading, so I can, go on and on about your chart like I just did here. Or I can book a full reading where you'll have even more information and more detailed analysis of your birth chart, and timing and events, and I can include 9-key Japanese astrology as well, and all that. All right, so that's it, guys. Thanks. Bye.